Good afternoon, everyone. This is Tony Greer from TG Macro with Real Vision. I'm here talking to Todd Harrison, my good friend, founder of CB1 Capital, Chief Investment Officer there. Todd, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing pretty good, TG. How you doing?
I'm great. It's exciting to talk to you now. I believe the last time we spoke was after a big cannabis downdraft, and at least now we can be a little bit more optimistic, can't we?
I think so. By our lens, I think that March was probably the cyclical low within the secular bull market. Certainly COVID, with the need for tax revenues at the state level, and certainly the jobs that it's going to create, coupled with the social justice initiatives we're seeing throughout the land, creates a bit of a perfect storm for the cannabis space. And that was before the election.
Yeah, let's talk about that for 1 second, because I like to do a little bit of a setup. Was Trump bad for cannabis, in your opinion? Let's just talk about his first admin, not knowing where we are. But in your opinion, was he bad hiring Jeff Sessions and Barr and, being maybe a little harsh on the industry, or not really?
I mean, the government writ large. I don't know if it was Mr. Trump as much as it was Mitch McConnell who really put the death knell on the cannabis initiatives that were coming through Congress. So he's been more of a thorn in the side of the industry than I think Trump has. But certainly, as we sit here 2 days after the election, we talk about some of the variables that are in play right now. But I think no matter what happens, I think we're going to be okay for the sector. Certainly, U.S. cannabis is setting itself, I think, apart from the crowd.
Yeah, honestly. All right, so let's just get us caught up then, right? We've come out of the election. I've read a lot about what's been expected going in, and I read that Boris Jordan, the CEO of Curaleaf, was saying that a Trump presidency and a blue wave would be the best thing for cannabis. And I'm saying, oh, okay, that sounds good. Maybe, that seems probable. Let's see what happens now. Now that we've got the opposite kind of looking like, it's going to transpire with a Biden presidency, but no blue wave to speak of. Are we in worse shape now, Todd, or are we still okay, would you say?
Well, I think we're okay. And listen, Bojo knows cannabis. Boris is, he's a smart guy. I don't know if I agreed that having Trump in there with the Blue Senate was the best case. I think I know what he was getting at, though. I think the concern among some industry operators was that if you saw a blue wave, you could swing the pendulum a little too far the other way. The social justice initiatives and a lot, not that that's a bad thing, but from a capitalist standpoint and for the MSOs, certainly. They want to keep things status quo for the time being. So I'll tell you the God's honest truth. I went into this thinking that a blue wave would have been the best case scenario, and I had I was a bit despondent, if you want to know the truth, when it looked like McConnell was going to hold on. But as I sat there and as I synthesized the following 24 hours after the election, the words that kept repeating in my mind were blessing in disguise. And it was really about the idea that a piecemeal legislative process, something like safe banking, which would allow access to the banking system for the sector, is not such a bad thing for the sector, and that it would be more gradual, it'll be more of a step function, and it would allow these U.S. operators to build more of a moat around their businesses before they got bum rushed by whether it's big CPG companies or even some of the Canadians or such. So I think blessing in disguise is where I netted out. But what's interesting, and I'm not sure when this is going to air, Tony, but here we are Thursday after the election. It's looking like a Biden president.
Hi, I'm Raoul Powell. Sorry to interrupt your video, I know it's a pain in the arse, but look, I want to tell you something important. I can tell that you really want to learn about what's going on in financial markets and understand the global economy in these complicated times. That's what we do at Real Vision. So this YouTube channel is a small fraction of what we actually do. You should really come over to realvision.com and see the 20 or so videos a week that we produce of this kind of quality of content, the deep analysis and understanding of the world around us. So if you click on the link below or go to realvision.com, it costs you $1. I don't think you can afford to be without it.
In disguise is where I netted out, but what's interesting, and I'm not sure when this is going to air, Tony, but here we are Thursday after the election. It's looking like a Biden presidency. It's looking like McConnell and the GOP is going to hold on to the Senate. But it came out late today that if Georgia actually runs off those 2 seats, that could tilt the Congress blue. And sure enough, here I am spending the last 24 hours post rationalizing that this is something that's going to work out. And then you have this potential concern. And I think the other concern with the blue wave is that if you deschedule or reschedule this to Schedule 2, the FDA could make life difficult for cannabis industry. So I think the industry was very happy with what looked like a Biden presidency and a GOP Senate, but we don't know 100% that that's what's going to come through.
Right. We're still battling some uncertainty, but what's good is that, we saw overwhelming approval at the ballot box for cannabis,
Yep.
Getting in New Jersey, Arizona, South Dakota, Montana, and I believe I'm missing one because there were Mississippi, thank you. And, it seems like the one true bipartisan issue that we have. And so I'm encouraged that, no matter what, eventually, talk to me about the domino effect, right? That's what everybody's been anticipating. We saw New Jersey approval was huge, right, to maybe clear the path for the Northeast. Do you think we still got momentum with that? And why has New York been the laggard? Like, those are my two big things that I always wonder about.
We've been saying for some time that the fast money is focused on the election, the smart money is focused on the fundamentals, and the big money is focused on trying to get into the space, right? They're still, by and large, on the outside looking in because of the federal treatment of this. They can't custody a lot of these assets. So, we're looking at growth at value multiples right now. You're looking at Trulieve, one of our holdings, trading at 8 times next year's EBITDA. This is a growth industry. TerrAscend, Curaleaf, Green Thumb, Columbia Care. These are companies. We have positions in these companies, Forefront. That are, in our opinion, growth dressed in value. For what we're about to see for a number of reasons. And again, the focus is on the fundamentals. The smart money is focusing on the fundamentals. The federal side opens up some potential regulatory arbitrages, whether that's safe banking or the States Act, but it's really about getting capital markets open for the cannabis industry. They've done incredibly well. Listen, if there's a baker's dozen of USO operators right now, about half of them have really gotten to the place where they've invested in the scale necessary for the next growth cycle. They're cash flow positive, and that's despite all of the artificial impediments that have been placed in their way throughout the last few years. So the notion of an even playing field, I think, is something that would bode incredibly well for the cannabis space. And again, U.S. cannabis, we think, no matter what happens at the federal level, this is a nascent secular bull market that's about to really reshape, I think, the economy and really the markets, as a growth industry.
Yeah, that's what I want to ask you about. Are we still in that sort of generational opportunity phase where we're getting a chance to invest in front of some of the big plain vanilla guys here, Todd? You still think we're early enough? None of that's going to happen until we're legalized on a federal level, right? Before the mutual funds can start piling in. And so this is your chance, right? And what's amazing, even though we've got some really big, large magnitude rallies on the screens in the last 2 days, when you call up some of the charts, man, you're still looking at, there's plenty of time, right? Like they're still at these basing levels and they've barely gotten off, right? Where should we be looking? Like, I know we keep talking about the MSOs. So that MSOS ETF is something that you want to light, and I've been following really closely. It looks like the big names in that ETF are largely like, your innovative industries, your grow generation, names that have doubled and maybe even quintupled this year. Tell me about that flow. What is going on with names like IIPR and GRWG going berserk? Tell me what the story is.
Yeah, I still don't think I answered the last question, but so MSOs is an ETF. We advise them. It's the only ETF that's listed on the New York Stock Exchange that has MSO holdings, that has multi-state operators. Their biggest holdings are Curaleaf, Green Thumb, Cresco, Trulieve, TerrAscend, Columbia Care, the names that you want to be in. Right. So we advise them on the research. We advise them on some of the media stuff and on philanthropy stuff. But certainly, that's where you want to be if you're going to be in the cannabis space. Now, we saw Canada have a huge run. It's either the greater fool theory, and that people just think that those Canadian tickers are actually U.S. Have U.S. exposure, and they don't. So whether it's a greater fool theory that's just liquid and they're going to migrate to liquidity, or if it's some weird third derivative Jedi mind shit that they're looking at a Biden presidency and saying, okay, maybe the second or third derivative is going to open up the space for the Canadian guys, or maybe it's just a big short squeeze. All of that remains to be seen. But for and with our money, we're treating Canada as trades, with one exception, Village Farms. As you know, we love Village Farms. We think it's mispriced. I think that stock is just, is a gift, if I can say that. We have a big position, but that's really it in Canada in terms of, core holdings. We want to stay with the haves, right? If you look at the cannabis industry as the haves and the have-nots right now, until such time that the legislative process opens up banking and removes 280E, which is a sonorous tax issue, and some of these other artificial impediments that have been placed in the way of the cannabis industry. Once that happens, you're going to see the space re-rate. Now, you had asked about the flow. And you said there's no elephants out there, and that's not entirely true. In this summer, we saw Putnam, which is a pretty big elephant, in the fund space, take a pretty sizable position in Forefront, which is a position of ours. We advise Forefront, but it has nothing to do with us, right? This is Putnam taking a big stake in a U.S. cannabis operator, the first that I've seen. And then we started to look around at the 13Fs. We saw Wasatch, which is a big Utah mutual fund, started to accumulate positions in Cresco and in Green Thumb and some others. And we know they're circling. They're not in yet, because, we saw the Trulieve deal earlier I guess it was a couple months ago. That was widely expected to bring in some blue chip accounts, the Wellingtons and the BlackRocks of the world. And the word was that those guys were largely absent, but they're not absent because they don't like the space. They're absent because they're waiting for a regulatory change so that they can start to invest in the space and not worry about crossing any sort of federal mandate. But that's all changing. So to your question, yes, we're at the top of the second. 1.0, Canadian cultivation, the least sexy part of the story. 2.0 is right. Using cannabis as an ingredient. As input costs come in, it's margin accretive. And that's going to be across a number of different end cases, end products and use cases. And then 3.0, obviously, that's the wellness, the medicine, the biotech pathway. As research opens up, I think they're going to find that this is an efficacious agility across a number of indications, which will give a nice little brand shadow halo effect for the 2.0 story. But all of that's in front of us. Right now, it's an exciting time. You asked about GrowGen. You asked about IIPR. Those are proxies. I mean, they're great businesses right now. Right. GrowGen, we have a position, but that's the Home Depot of cannabis. But it's a non-plant touching ancillary that institutional investors can proxy the cannabis space. Where you want to go, the meat and potatoes or the MSOs?
So when you mentioned the valuations level, like Trulieve trading 8 times EBITDA, right? You pointed out, and I want to point out this chart you posted on Twitter in a great pre-election day thread that you put up that showed that MSOs have valuation in the bottom third of all industries, but the highest revenue growth rate of any industry. And that was the most bombarding visual that I've seen. And I feel like everybody that's trafficking in cannabis should certainly be looking at that, because we're talking about an outlier industry with what we feel is outlier potential trading at an absurdly cheap level. So, I mean, what's going to happen with that, Todd? Are we just going to see the classic multiple expansion as everybody rushes into this space? And I may have asked this but duplicitously, but is it okay to just own the MSOS ETF? Or do you think we should pick away and diversify and own some of the growers and some of the distributors and some of the medical space plays like GWPH? Talk to me about how you think about all of that I just put together. And I'm sorry that's a loaded question, but you can handle it.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, I've been doing this a long time, Tony. The only right answer to that question is that everybody has a unique time horizon and risk profile, and you have to make decisions that are consistent with what's best for your particular needs. Okay, so with that asterisk under the way,
great point.
I'll say MSOS is, I think, a great proxy for the space for for those who want to get some quick exposure to the space, and certainly it's because it has that MSO, baseline structure. But that chart that you were referencing, I can't take credit for that. That was Matt McGinley over at Needham that put that chart together, which I hope you could weave into this interview, because it is the single greatest graphic that I've seen in this space that really illuminates the opportunity. And it's what we've been talking about for a long time. And that, you have this situation where you have this incredible growth priced at value. And this has been the situation. And certainly, we could talk about the value traps. We could talk about Ianthus. We could talk about, MedMen. They were all cheap at one point, but they were cheap for a reason, right? So it's not about finding the cheapest multiple. It's about finding the best in breed execution, the best management, the best footprint, and the best operators, at those cheap multiples. And at the risk of sort of talking my book, we've listed them sort of already. It is those big four. And pull up these charts. I hope when we do, when this finally posts to Real Vision, you'll pull up a chart of Curaleaf, and you'll see what that looks like. You'll pull up a chart of Green Thumb and that Blue Sky breakout, or the inverted Head and Shoulders in TrueLeaf, or Cresco, which is about to break out. I think these things are going to run into earnings, and then you take a look. All else being equal, but I don't see a scenario where this trade gets unwound, right? These horses aren't going back in the barn. And certainly, if the election did anything, it illuminated that the will of the people. I mean, it's not, again, the sweet, it's not just that all 5 states swept. It's how they swept. These were mercy rule tallies, right? Even Mississippi passed medical. Mississippi, I talk about the historical, magnitude there. South Dakota passed recreational adult use and medical, right? So, you talk a little bit about what this looks like in the Senate. We have all these new senators coming in who have constituents who are either, working in the cannabis industry or getting their medicine from the cannabis industry. And they're talking that there's 280,000 cannabis jobs right now in the country, none of which is in the BLS, mind you. And they're talking about there being, upwards of 1 million, in a couple of years from now as this phases through. So, unpacking 2 questions ago, because I still remember about why New Jersey and what the domino effect portends. So if you're watching Tom Wolfe and John Fetterman, who I love, in Pennsylvania, they're all about cannabis, and they're looking at New Jersey, and they're looking at the border, anything that borders on New Jersey. New York, Cuomo came out today and he said that, that the time is ripe, right? The time was ripe 2 years ago, but 2 years ago, you didn't have a neighboring state that was coming online. They don't want to lose that tax revenue. They don't want to lose those jobs. So we think New Jersey is going to domino Pennsylvania, New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island next year. And then you got Maryland, you got Virginia coming behind them in 2022. The importance of that is that the total addressable market continues to increase.
Right.
The consumers globally, nationally, the consumer's there. So you don't have to go out and teach people about what this product is and why they use it. Right now you have 1 in 3 people in this country now live in a state that they can consume cannabis. If the Eastern Seaboard, if they open up New York and Pennsylvania, you're talking about 80% of the U.S. population is going to be in a cannabis-friendly state. So like 80%. Which is almost as high as the approval ratings for medical, which is 96%. But this is happening, and it's happening at the state level, no matter what happens at the federal level. But we think the arbitrages at the federal level are going to start to kick in as well. Yeah,
I just want to touch on the timing. I think the timing of the U.S. trade now is much different, as you say, Todd, in the cannabis 2.0 trade, right? The 1.0 trade was sort of a crowded retail trade that was being discussed mostly in Canada, because of the Canadian listings. And then by the time it got brought to the US and got popular, to me, it was already a kind of a trade that you knew was happening. It was on the board. You had people that were telling you about their favorite names in the space. And you're like, oh, okay, I'm definitely late to this, and then we had that really nice washout. We had everybody basically throwing the towel at the end of last year.
I don't know if the washout was nice. I mean, for those of us who still have scar tissue to show for that washout, that was 92%,
Yeah.
Not us, but I'm saying the space lost 92% from January 2018 to March 2020. So there was nothing nice about that.
No. But the timing lines up even better. If you've got dry powder and you're like, oh, look what sector just fell in my lap, that's probably going to be in play for years to come. That's how I was looking at it. And so I felt like I feel like the timing now, given the optics of, like you said, the widespread pass at the ballot, and now that we've got 1 of every 3 Americans living in a state that cannabis is legal in, I think that just continues to spread and spread it.
Again, you can learn a lot just by watching here. So the names that we're talking about, whether that's the Curaleafs, the Green Thumbs, the Crescos, the GTIs, look at the volume that's coming into this space. Massive volume. And look at these chart setups. I mean, again, I've been trading for 30 years. You look for 4 conditional elements, 4 metrics, right? Fundamentals, technical, structural, and psychology, right? If you have those 4 legs under the table, you're probably going to end up winning. And you have the fundamentals, which are just top notch at these operators that are crushing it right now. Technically, pull up these charts while we're doing this interview. Hopefully, you can show some of these charts and the setups. Structurally, we think that a lot of these impediments are starting to fall down. In psychology, I don't have to tell you, this is something that, is going to spread. I don't even think like the names like the MSOs, the ETF. I don't even think that, people understand the difference between that and MJ. MJ is all Canada, right? MSOs is all US, but people don't think, they just trade, I think. A lot of that's going on. CNBC, God bless them. And others, when they talk about the cannabis trade, they're putting up tickers that show, Canadian operators. And I don't think people are educated enough on the space yet to really draw that distinction. So, sure, you'll have some crossover, whether it's Canopy or maybe a Free or some of these guys. Village has U.S. interests, Village Farms. But by and large, the pure plays here are the MSOs, and those are the ones that I think are going to really reward the investors who do the work.
Okay, I like it. I like the pivot into the U.S. I like making sure that we're educated about where we're investing in cannabis. I want to talk about a couple of Canadian names because they've been very high on our radar screen since the beginning, and I don't want to leave them for dead just yet. Canopy Growth and GWPH, right? 2 of the bigger Canadian names, 2 totally different spaces, right? We, the Canopy grower, and GWPH, GW Pharmaceutical, your baby in the pharmaceutical space, if that's still the case. Give us an update in those 2 names. I know we're going outside of the U.S. with Canopy Growth, but what do you think about it?
Well, GW is actually a British company. They're based over in the UK, but that is very much 3.0. That's the gold standard for cannabinoid wellness. Yes, still my favorite position. It was my favorite position at 140 when we spoke this summer, and it was my favorite position, earlier this week when it dropped to $89 ahead of earnings. It's now trading at about $110, right about the 200-day. I think this is a $350 stock dressed up as a $110 stock. We bought more on the way down. It felt wrong. You have broader market risk, of course, but GW is in a league of its own as far as we're concerned on the 3.0 stuff. Canopy, listen, really like the new CEO. I think that, it's a very natural progression to get out a founder. And I think Bruce has done, did great things for this industry, but certainly at a point, the founder usually gets, shown the door for somebody who has a nicer looking suit for the corner office, right? You want to appease those institutional investors. Very natural transition. They're huge. They have a relationship with TerrAscend. TerrAscend is one of our favorite U.S. players, Jason Wild, from JW Asset Management, who I think is, when I have a question about cannabis, he's who I ask, right? So,
okay.
Smart guy, and he's doing great things with TerrAscend and Jason Ackerman, who was the founder of Fresh Direct. So, these are the types of situations that you want to find, the good, solid management, people who you can trust, who have investors' best interests at heart. But the reason I bring up Jason is because I know TerrAscend has a relationship with Canopy. And David Klein, by all measures that I've seen so far is the real deal. So, certainly, again, we trade Canada. We've been long Canopy. for a trade because of this, whether it's the sympathy play or whether it's the read through on Biden, or whether it's the fact that New York's going to go. They have a huge hemp processing facility in New York, and they have the acreage relationship. We're not very keen on acreage, but I think Canopy could do something, with that property that they spend so much money on. So that is a U.S., for somebody who wants a liquid, stock to trade that has U.S. Tangential opportunities. Canopy is probably pretty good. GW, again, a British company, but favorite name on the 3.0 side. And the only company in Canada that I really think is worth taking a look at is Village Farms. Do the work. The biggest North American produce tomato farmer. They have all the relationships on the distribution side through those 30 years of supermarket relationships that they've built. And they have great properties, whether it's in Texas, whether it's in the Netherlands, whether it's in New Zealand. They're extending their footprint globally. And I think it's trading at some, remarkable multiple now that they bought Pure Sunfarms. I think it's trading like 2.5 times sales, next year's sales, which is just, it's an anomaly.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's amazing, Todd, that we hear people complaining constantly on FinTwit that, value trade is dead and that there's no value, propositions out there. And, without saying anything, the only thing that pops into my brain is cannabis, and that's the real value play here. And I think like you, if we're positioned in the right places, in the right countries, and in the right sort of verticals, that the opportunities in terms of percentage performance from here to the end of the year certainly are enormous. And I just feel like, if I'm looking at my portfolio to see what might perform big in the next 3 months, I'd make a bet on cannabis before I'd make a bet on big tech from here in terms of percentage move. So I think that's why this is really exciting. I got one more name that's kind of been a thorn in my side because I've lost money on it being long twice from much lower prices. How is Scotts Miracle-Gro such a tightly tied stock to the cannabis story and literally one of the best performers if you link it directly to that industry? Can you color us in on that? I've chased the chart with no success.
Yeah, no, it's not a pure play. They have the Hawthorne division. I think GrowGen, if you want to play Scotch, you play GrowGen instead, certainly. But I do want to circle back and unpack something on the MSOs for a second, because what's interesting about the space is, you obviously have the fangification trade, right? That's, Curaleaf, Green Thumb, Cresco, True Leaf, and I would even throw maybe TerraSend in there, Columbia Cares in that conversation. And those are your tier ones, right? And then as you get into tier two, and those guys are going to win no matter what, right? No matter what happened in the election, if it was status quo, which was widely considered to be the worst case scenario, you want to own the big guys because they've already built the moat. They're at scale. They're spitting off free cash flow. They've got the footprint. They've made the investment. The stronger are going to get stronger. Same thing we saw in Canada. We saw Aurora and Afria and Canopy and MedRelief, I think, when that whole thing first came out of the gate. You're going to see that same sort of fangification play here. But what gets interesting is as you start to move down that MSO totem pole, and you start to look at companies like AYR, which I know was on Real Vision. Jonathan was on Real Vision recently. Forefront, so Harvest. You start to move down. Jushi. You got a bit more optionality to they need capital much more than some of these big guys do. So, if you're talking about the cost of capital coming down with safe banking from 13 to 15% down to 7 to 8%. Right. All of a sudden you're talking, and forget the fact that you no longer have to issue stock. You can now get debt financing. Right. It inflects your balance sheet. Right. Yeah. So it's a really powerful. So you have much more beta from some of those second and third tier guys. Like I watched Forefront today. It was up 25%. Well, 25% is 25%, but you're not going to, you saw the big guys up, 4 to 5%. So, you have more optionality in some of those second and third tier guys, but you don't necessarily have the safety net that you do with the top tier guys.
Okay. Man, Todd, is there anything that I know how I want to wrap it up, but is there anything that you want to touch on that's topical that I might have left out? Because when I look at this story, I look at it, as you say, we want to be long the right names, sort of the ones that are the fangification names in the U.S. being, True Leaf and Cresco and Curaleaf. We want to be long the Village Farms types in Canada. And, I guess we want to keep an eye on the political developments and look to see how we're going to get cash to all of these, companies in the best way through the Banking Act. And that's really the gateway that I see it to the next level of trading, where we've got mutual funds that start to pile in. And then, we've got other players at the table. Does that sound like the right wrap up of the industry for today's purposes? And what am I leaving out?
No, I think you didn't mention Green Thumb. That's definitely part of the conversation. But I'm going to be watching the 13Fs that come out over the next week or so. I think you're going to see more institutions sort of, coming in through the side door for the space. I mean, I'll tell you this, I talked to a lot of small cap growth managers, all over. And the ones that aren't allowed to buy this for their fund, which is most of them, are buying these stocks in their PA, which tells you all you need to know about, what they think of the value proposition of the space. So I think this round of 13Fs will see something. But the next round that come out in January, February, it'll be real interesting because, we saw one big institution come in on Friday in Green Thumb and take down 5.5 million shares. And, $20 stock, 20, I think it was 22 at the time. But nonetheless, these are big players. I'm not going to get into the speculation about who I heard it was, but if it was any of the three guys who it's being bandied around, this is not stupid money. So, I would encourage people to do the work, shed your sort of, traditional learnings. This is a gateway drug. I learned it from watching you, Dad. This is your brain on drugs. Cannabis isn't an enemy. It's a friend, not a foe. We talked about this last time, for 30,000 years, or the last 10,000 years is medicine. And then 90 years ago, the U.S. government decided to weaponize it to stop the Mexicans from coming into El Paso. The whole thing is bullshit. I mean, the whole reason this was moved into, this area of illegality was politically motivated. And, if I can say this with a straight face, I think the U.S. government has blood on their hands. I think that this is a criminal negligence, given that what they've known about the efficacy of this drug. But at this point, I think we just need to move it forward. It's moving forward. With or without us, it's moving forward. But man, what a time to be alive.
Yeah, it is, man. And Todd, that makes me, think back to when we first met and you sent me your original research piece on the sector. And I got back, I sat on the couch for hours one day and blasted through that whole thing. And that's where you tell the story about how it began in the United States. And knowing that history and then coming to where we are now, I mean, that's a great way to get caught up. And so if you can, tell us where we can get a hold of you, where people can find you, if that's okay, in whatever mode that you like, maybe get a hold of that research piece and learn more about what CB1 Capital is all about. And because I really feel like we've got some compelling trade ideas in this video, and they probably deserve a lot of attention. So tell us where people can reach you. And thank you so much for your time and putting this all together for us today, man. This was the perfect timing for a cannabis chat.
Yeah, no, and Tony, I appreciate you. I know we had some technical issues today, but you're good people, and I've known you for a long time. I'm on Twitter, Todd_Harrison, Todd at TODD at CB1cap.com. We have a research note that goes out every morning, or a recap on the space that's free. And we love to educate people. This is about being on the right side of history. And if we can make some generational coin in the process, and God knows, listen, I've been coming on Real Vision and talking about this for the last couple of years, and I was wrong. I was early. It was painful, but this is what we've been waiting for, is getting to this point right now. And I think it's a really exciting time to, for the space and for the people who stuck it out.
100%, man. The opportunity is blinding to me. And it's great to have, honestly, it's important to have a beacon like you in the space, because this is frontier land for investors. And, you need calm, cool heads to prevail, and you need to be able to choose wisely. And you've been doing an unbelievable job at that. And so I want to commend you for that and say thank you for giving us the time, man. You're a true credit to your profession. And I want to thank you very much for coming on the show today.
No, I thank you, Tony. I appreciate it. And let's do this again soon.
We sure will. We'll catch up at higher prices, man.
That's right.
You good. Thank you, Todd.
I hope you enjoyed this special episode of The Interview, the premier business and finance series in the world. However, this is just the tip of the iceberg. For more in-depth content and expert analysis, visit the membership link in the description to unlock a week's access for only $1. This dollar can change your life.